Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the debut album from Troye Sivan, titled Blue Neighborhood. I have to be honest, I was not looking forward to talking about this album. And really, if you took a look at any of my reviews last year, especially of TRYXE, you'd understand why. The only reason I covered that EP in the first place is because I was overloaded by requests from you guys. And even in that case, I only remember fragments of that album over a year later. Most cuts took the modern percussion and reverb heavy brand of modern pop production and paired it with broad lyrical conceits that didn't really always land, and a vocal performance that I would best describe as adequate. It was a perfectly harmless EP, don't get me wrong, but that also meant that outside of fragments of Happy Little Pill and The Fault in Our Stars, I don't remember it at all. So when I started getting requests to cover his full-length debut album, Blue Neighborhood, I had no reason to care about this. But then I started to notice a few things. For one, the critics are praising this more than I would have expected, basically being described as a male cross between Lorde and Lana Del Rey. And while of course the latter comparison did not strike any confidence with me, it was the Lorde remark that actually spurred a little bit of interest. Most because all of his vocal collaborators on this debut are other Australian and New Zealand acts, the majority of which I've never heard of before. The person that I had heard of before was in the songwriting credits, because while Troye Sivan was the main writing credit on every song, the name that caught my eye was Jack Antonoff, member of Fun and frontman of Bleachers, one of my favorite indie rock acts to explode in recent years. And hell, all the buzz was suggesting this would be a more upbeat and exciting affair than the tepid slog of TRYXE, so I decided to give Troye Sivan one more chance. So what do we get here? Well, honestly, this is a bit stronger. I'm not gonna say that it's great or groundbreaking, it's not. Troye Sivan still plays in very conventional, synth-driven, percussion-heavy modern pop, but it is a step up from TRYXE. It seems to sit on the flip side for me against the rather disappointing debut album from years and years that I reviewed earlier this year, where I had much higher expectations. Both are synth-heavy records exploring the themes of gay male vulnerability, but I feel like Troye Sivan hits his notes a little bit more effectively for me. Although, whether he's got a song as good as Gold on this record, that's up for debate. So let's start off with Troye Sivan himself, and honestly, I'm still not wild about his vocal delivery, although I will say his presence behind the microphone has definitely improved. The most common comparison points to his liquid, understated tones and cadence have been Lana Del Rey and Lorde, which I can definitely hear, again, especially on tracks like Cool and Fools, but I feel there's a richer, more earnest and wistful core beneath Troye Sivan's vocals, which does reflect a certain understated charisma that can make his vulnerability rather compelling. And yet, for as often as this record wants to have those heavier, more anthemic moments, it doesn't often stick the landing or make too much use of Troye Sivan's surprisingly solid and soulful lower range as it could. Tracks like Youth and Wild seem to be crying out for more power or real recklessness to embody that. And look, maybe I was just a child of pop rock from the mid-2000s, but no matter how heavy the percussion is, I don't get that same sense of exuberance behind Troye Sivan's delivery. And when he's slurring his vocals on the bridge of Lost Boy, that does not help matters either. Now granted, I take his vocals over All Days on For Him. I like the intimate details in Troye Sivan's lyrics, but All Days' flow and vocal tone just do not work for that song at all, especially considering how the instrumentation strips back to become even more chintzy. It doesn't sound good. Thankfully, both Broods and especially Betty Who pick up the slack in a big way on their songs, with Betty Who's beautiful vocals adding a lot to the already excellent song Heaven, one of the high points of this album. And on that note, let's talk about lyrics and themes. The area where I feel Troye Sivan has definitely improved the most. And what I like most is the balance that Troye Sivan keeps across the majority of this album. He presents a shy sort of vulnerability that normally wouldn't be my thing in male pop stars, but he's able to balance it out with real desire that doesn't feel sterilized or fake. It also helps me notice that Troye Sivan has reached the age where he's self-aware enough about his own failings and mature enough to accept the consequences for them. Fools takes him through the arc of a failed relationship where he had dreams of the future in a big way that only kind of sputtered out nowadays. With Taught Me Down asking for companionship from that ex where he's entirely aware that they aren't meant for each other right now. He's just looking for a little bit of support from somebody that's familiar. Now there are points where it can really push my patience, most notably on Lost Boy, where he wholeheartedly admits this hookup, it was only short term, he's messed up, his partner could definitely do better than him, but that acknowledgement doesn't quite work when you're still exploiting this guy and leading him on. Dude, not cool. At least when The Weeknd engages in his self-destructive routine, he's got the foresight to keep himself locked in his own little world. Where this record gets more interesting, at least for me, is when Troye Sivan takes a look at the larger world around him, with Cool showing how much he and others try to live that LA lifestyle when it really isn't for them, and Suburbia showing both the shallowness of his nostalgia for his childhood, and yet the feeling that he is missing something but not coming home as often. But the real gut punch track on this album is Heaven, where Troye Sivan tackles both his faith in God and his sexuality, trying to reconcile being gay with a desire to get to heaven and set a good example for his future kids, where certain ignorant parts of society have condemned such a union. Co-written by Jack Antonoff, it's got a layer of nuance in the framing and conversation that shows the sort of conflict that you rarely ever see well articulated in these sort of situations, and there's no easy answer given. It's a really powerful song. Now, it also helps matters that it's one of the tracks with the instrumentation and production really does support him quite well, with the loop piano line and the melody actually getting some decent swell behind it. But look, if I were to highlight a major weakness on this album, it would probably be the production and instrumentation. Not that it's bad. Outside of a few songs being overmixed and not being a fan at all of the looped vocal snippets or child backing vocals or the pitch shifting, most of the production is exactly what you would expect from Troye Sivan. In other words, completely compatible and blending in with modern trends, being percussion heavy with restrained melodies and a fair bit of reverb. And as I feel I've said countless times now, when you de-emphasize your instrumental melody in favor of percussion, it's hard for songs to really stick in the brain in the same way. Now, all that being said, I was caught a little bit off guard by how much actual edge this record has, from the warping synth waves on Fools to the grittier, slightly harsher trap-inspired percussion all across the sound, to the very punchy drums on Ease that's actually got a little bit more bite to it than you'd otherwise expect. And yet, on a different note, the beautiful strings compositions on Taught Me Down and Suburbia are actually pretty damn solid on their own right. And for as much as Troye Sivan's playing the song tongue-in-cheek, the wet bass groove on Cool actually did have some decent groove behind it. I actually kind of like that. But again, it's hard for me to deny that while there are moments on this album that do stick with me, the fact that many of these melodies don't really have a distinctive tone beyond the wet, buzzy synthesizers and muted pianos means that I kind of wish there was more distinctive melody and more distinctive instrumental moments to drive this album forward, make it really stand out from the pack. But you know, in the end, despite the flaws, I did find a fair amount to like about this album. I still think Troye Sivan's got a fair ways to go before he really wins me over on a pop release, but this is a step in the right direction. So for me, it's a strong 6 out of 10, and definitely a recommendation if you're a fan, or if you're looking for some pretty decent modern pop. I definitely see potential from this guy that I didn't usually see before, so definitely looking forward to seeing more from you, Troye. Good job. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. Just so you all know, this is my opinion, whatever that's worth. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.